The worst part wasn't the humiliation. It wasn't the laughter. It wasn't even when she clinked her glass and called me her walking cautionary tale. No, the worst part was realizing they already knew. Her coworkers. Her boss. That drunken turn in the silver dress who spilled champagne down her leg and laughed like hyenas were trendy. They all knew she didn't love me. They'd known for months. And I was the only idiot who thought I still mattered. I remember standing near the dessert table, pretending to read the menu printed in cursive on thick ivory cardstock. I kept nodding like I was considering the creme brulee, but really I was trying not to cry in front of a guy named Bryce who kept adjusting his cufflinks like it was a sport. Every time Danielle glanced at me across the room, I smiled like a golden retriever. Desperate, hopeful, foolish. She didn't smile back once. Instead, she leaned closer to her coworker Nathan, the one with the permanently unbuttoned collar and too perfect stubble. She laughed at something he whispered, touched his arm, didn't flinch when he touched hers back. I wasn't supposed to be there that night. She told me it was more of a work thing, and that I'd probably be bored. But when I showed up uninvited, holding the bouquet she forgot on our kitchen counter, she didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. And that's when the shift started. She introduced me like I was an app she regretted downloading. This is Jeremy. He's in between things right now. Laughter. Someone said, so, like a temp fiancé? She didn't correct them. They offered me wine and questions I wasn't supposed to answer. So what do you two actually have in common? Is she your first, or just the last one who didn't run? I tried to make a joke about being an introvert. Danielle rolled her eyes and said, he thinks being quiet is his whole personality. Isn't that adorable? It wasn't the words that hurt. It was how comfortable she was saying them. Like she'd rehearsed. The nail in the coffin? When the slideshow started, some stupid work tradition where they played baby pictures of team members for laughs. A photo popped up of Danielle in her childhood Halloween costume. She was a witch. Black hat. Crooked smile. The room cheered. She stood, raised her glass, and said, witches get married too, even if it's just for practice. Everyone turned and looked at me, and I realized I wasn't her partner. I was her punchline. So I left. Quietly. No drama. No speech. Just my ring on the edge of her wine glass. It made a tiny clink when it touched the crystal. No one noticed. She didn't text me until 3 a.m. The message just said, really? I stared at it for 10 full minutes before deleting it. The thing is, that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because what I saw the next morning, it made everything so much worse. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed for hours, still wearing the same shirt from the party, staring at nothing like some glitching NPC in a game no one's playing. Every now and then, I'd unlock my phone, reread her text, really? And then lock it again without answering. By 6 a.m., my hands were still trembling. I had questions. Not the kind you ask out loud. The kind that sit in your chest and rot. Questions like, did she always think this little of me? When did the respect vanish? Was I the only one who didn't notice? And the most disturbing one, what if she was never truly mine to begin with? So I did something I'm not proud of. I opened her laptop. I know, it wasn't my business. It's not even technically ours. But we lived together. Shared everything. She'd left it charging on the kitchen counter. And I couldn't stop thinking about that look she gave Nathan at the party. Like I was the doormat, and he was the destination. I didn't snoop far. I didn't need to. Her browser had a bunch of tabs open. Most were harmless. Pinterest boards for wedding flower arrangements, an Amazon cart full of throw pillows, a BuzzFeed quiz about, which mythical couple are you? But then there was one that stopped me cold. A hotel reservation confirmation. From 2 nights ago. I clicked it open. Downtown Indianapolis. Boutique place. 2 nights. King suite. Booked under her name and someone else's. Not mine. The name was Silas K. Never heard of him. I blinked. Refreshed the tab. Thought maybe it was for a client meeting or some kind of event. But my stomach already knew the truth before my brain caught up. Danielle had always said I was too trusting. Too naive. Turns out she was right. I searched her inbox. Just typed Silas in the search bar. Nothing. Then I tried K. Found an email chain buried under some PayPal receipts. The subject line was, can't wait for our next escape kiss mark. The message? Still thinking about last weekend. I wish I could have stayed longer, but I had to get home before Jeremy got suspicious. I'll tell him I'm working late again. Just book the room. Same place. There it was. My name. Dropped casually into a lie. It hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just office party cruelty. This was a full-blown affair. With hotel bookings, escape plans, secret names, emoji kisses. And the worst part? I didn't feel angry. I felt stupid. Like a stray dog who thought it got adopted, but was just being babysat until something better came along. I didn't confront her right away. I didn't scream or throw her laptop or break anything. That's not who I am. Instead, I took a walk. Just wandered through our neighborhood like a sleepwalker in jeans and a hoodie while the sun started to rise. Everyone's houses looked so peaceful. And mine, ours, was full of rot. When I finally came back hours later, she was still asleep. Peaceful, tangled in sheets we picked out together at Bed Bath & Beyond, probably dreaming of someone who wasn't me. I sat on the couch and waited. I wasn't sure yet what I'd say, but I knew it wouldn't be really. She came into the kitchen yawning, scratching her shoulder, wearing my old hoodie like it still meant something. She looked peaceful, like someone who hadn't called me a placeholder in front of 30 people last night. Like someone who hadn't booked a suite with another man while still wearing my ring. The kettle clicked as I made coffee I didn't want. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Maybe guilt, maybe a confession, maybe just the sound of her voice cracking under the weight of a lie. But instead, she said, "You left your phone in the fridge again." Like that was the issue today. I nodded. I said nothing. My mind was spinning like it was rewinding every second of the last 3 years and looking for scenes I'd missed. I didn't know how to start. There's no manual for this. No guidebook for confronting someone who's built a second life around your blind spots. She poured herself coffee and leaned on the counter like it was just another Saturday. That's when I asked it. Quietly. Almost politely. "Who's Silas?" She froze. Just for a second. But it was long enough. Long enough for me to know she wasn't going to lie because she thought I was wrong. She was going to lie because she knew I was right. And she was going to do it anyway. "Silas?" she repeated, blinking like the name meant nothing. Then, "Oh, he's just a guy from the office. He's on the Baltimore account." "Why?" I didn't answer. I just pulled her laptop toward me. Still open, screen dimmed, but active. Click. The hotel reservation. The email thread. Her lipstick-stained wine glass from the night before was still next to it. Like a crime scene frozen in time. She looked at the screen. She didn't gasp. Didn't apologize. She didn't cry or beg or break down like in the movies. Instead, she did something I'll never forget. She smiled. Not a big one. Just the tiniest twitch of her lip. Then she sipped her coffee and said, "Okay, so you saw that." That was it. That's all she said. Not "I'm sorry," not "it's not what it looks like," not "please let me explain." Just "so you saw that." Like I'd stumbled on an unpaid parking ticket, not a betrayal that cracked open my entire life. I asked her how long it had been going on. She shrugged. "Does it matter?" I asked her why. She stared at her mug, swirled the coffee, and said, "I thought we'd break up before it got serious. I didn't expect you to propose." Those words felt like a punch. A quiet, clinical punch to the ribs. Not even angry. Just surgical. "I didn't know how to say no," she added, her voice low but not trembling. "You looked so proud. And I thought, maybe I can learn to love this. But I never really did." That was when something inside me collapsed. Not dramatically. Not with a scream. Just a quiet, internal folding, like a tent giving in to wind. I asked, "Was I ever enough for you?" She hesitated, then whispered, almost gently, "No, but you were easy." I stood there staring at her. At this stranger in my hoodie. At this woman who used to kiss my forehead before bed and text me whenever she saw a corgi in public. Now she was calmly dismantling our engagement like it was an old IKEA shelf she no longer needed. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just walked to the bedroom, pulled my suitcase from under the bed, and started packing. She didn't follow. Didn't stop me. Didn't ask where I was going. The last thing she said before I walked out was, "Don't make this a thing, Jeremy. You're not built for drama." She was right about one thing. I'm not. But this was never going to end quietly. I left her apartment with nothing but a half-zipped suitcase, my laptop, and the last ounce of self-respect I hadn't bartered away for her affection. The sun was already creeping up behind the skyline, the city yawning into another beautiful day while I was falling apart in slow motion. I didn't go home. I couldn't. That place didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a prop in someone else's stage play. Instead, I drove. No destination, no plan. just keys in the ignition and a need to outrun the weight in my chest. I ended up 3 hours away in a tiny coastal town where my college roommate, Mason, worked as a high school band director. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe a year, but he was the kind of person who didn't ask questions when you showed up looking like you'd slept in a parking lot and lost your soul somewhere on I-65. He let me crash on his couch, offered me black coffee in silence. Mason was never the emotional type, but he always knew when to talk and when not to. And for most of that first day, we didn't say a word. I just sat there in his living room, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above me, thinking about how a woman I once called home now lived in my head like a haunted house. It was the second night when things changed. I just started scrolling through my emails to cancel the wedding venue deposit when something weird caught my eye. A shared Google Drive folder I didn't recognize, titled Dex, Q4 Review, Internal Only, sent from Danielle's company domain. My email wasn't even connected to her work account. Why would I have access? I clicked, and what I saw made my blood turn cold. Inside the folder were slides, timelines, event photos, and a series of internal culture content videos. Team recaps, drunk interviews from holiday parties. The kind of stuff HR usually forgets to monitor. And there she was, Danielle, in a cropped video labeled Halloween Party Real Talk. The video was low quality, recorded at some kind of bar, probably late at night. Danielle was sitting between two guys I didn't recognize, holding a cocktail and laughing like she hadn't a care in the world. One of the guys, off camera, said, "So come on, Danny, what's really the deal with you and that fiancé of yours?" She leaned back, smirking. "Jeremy," she said, and then snorted. "He's fine. He's like that old sweater you keep around even though it doesn't fit anymore. Not exciting, but warm. Safe." The guy off camera laughed. "So why marry him?" She shrugged. "Stability. He's predictable. I know what I'm getting. With Silas, it's chaos. Passion. But Jeremy? He folds my laundry without asking." The other guy chimed in. "So it's like fiancé for weekdays, Silas for the weekends?" And she didn't deny it. She just raised her glass and toasted. I sat there, Mason beside me, watching this grainy footage like it was surveillance from my own funeral. The whole room felt 10 degrees colder. Mason paused the video, turned to me. His face had gone pale. "Dude, I think I know that guy. The one who asked the question. Off camera." I blinked. "What?" He nodded slowly. "That voice. That's Kellen. He used to date my sister. He works in private equity now. Same firm as Danielle." I stared at him. "You're sure?" Mason didn't even hesitate. "Absolutely. That guy's a snake. Always has been." He made a few calls that night. Old contacts. Industry gossip. And within 2 hours, I had a LinkedIn profile, an Instagram handle, and a folder full of screenshots from Silas's account. He wasn't just someone she met recently. He'd been at our engagement party. He smiled in the background of our photos. He commented on her posts with inside jokes I never understood. One of his comments, on a picture of us at a lake last summer, just said, "Does he even know?" I felt sick. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what came next. Mason knew someone who had briefly worked in IT at their firm, someone who handled onboarding and access credentials. With a little pressure and a lot of guilt tripping, Mason convinced him to meet us at a local diner. We sat across from this guy, skinny, anxious, the kind of guy who twitches when the waitress asks if you want water. He barely touched his food. He looked at me, then at Mason, then back again. Then he said, "Look, I shouldn't even be here. But you deserve to know. Your name came up in the internal chat channels a lot. Jokes. Bets." They had this thread. It was called "Will Jeremy Find Out?" I didn't breathe. He continued. "They weren't just mocking you behind your back. There were memes. Screenshots. A whole Slack emoji made from your face." And then he added the sentence that broke me in a way nothing else had. She didn't stop them. She was one of the top contributors. I sat there, gripping the edges of the table like I might fall off the planet. He reached into his bag, slid over a USB stick, and said, "You were never supposed to see that." He was right. But now that I had, I wasn't going to let it go. I didn't sleep again after that diner meeting. I just sat in Mason's guest room, USB stick clutched in my palm like it might detonate, replaying that sentence over and over. She was one of the top contributors. The emoji, the jokes, the bets, it was humiliating enough. But what gnawed at me deeper wasn't just the betrayal of love, it was the performance. The deliberate, sustained performance of partnership she put on for me while mocking me in private channels like I was a clown unaware of the act. The next morning, Mason dropped a bomb of his own. He said he'd been thinking all night, and something wasn't adding up, not about Danielle's affair, but about her job. He told me Danielle's name had come up in a conversation a few months ago with a friend of his who worked in commercial auditing. At the time, he didn't think much of it, just a passing mention about someone inflating numbers on internal budgets. Now, with everything happening, it clicked. I hadn't just been her emotional doormat. I might have been her cover. We did everything jointly. Our finances were partially merged. Our taxes were filed together the past year, under a clause allowed for engaged domestic partners in our state. I paid most of the rent since her bonus structure was inconsistent. I never questioned it. I thought I was being supportive. After all, love means picking up the slack sometimes, right? Mason's friend, I'll call him Eric, agreed to meet us, on the condition that his name never leaves the story. He worked at a firm that consulted with Danielle's company quarterly. When I walked into the neutral little coffee shop, he recognized me instantly. "You're Jeremy?" he asked, lowering his sunglasses. "Holy sh*T. I've heard so much about you." "Not in the way you hope." He pulled out a folder, not company docs, but his own notes. Things he wasn't allowed to say on record but had been tracking. Apparently, over the last year, Danielle's expense reports had become erratic. Multiple flagged entries. Travel that didn't match itineraries. Invoices labeled as client dinners that were actually spa weekends and out-of-town hotels, one of which matched the reservation I'd found in her browser. But here's where it got worse. Some of those expenses were tied to my name. She'd submitted reimbursement requests claiming I was a contractor. Freelance analytics support, she called it. $3,200 in one quarter. Another $1,100 in software licensing for tools I'd never even heard of. And because I did technically work in data, and because she lived with me, no one questioned it. She used me as the receipt. "You were the alibi," Eric said. "She framed everything around you. Made it look legit. Everyone thought you two were some kind of low-key startup couple. It actually gave her more credibility." I felt physically ill. It wasn't just my heart that had been used. It was my name, my work, my signature on trust and credibility. The entire relationship had been leveraged as currency, emotionally, socially, and now, professionally. She played the part of devoted partner so well that I started to wonder if that was the role, not fiancé, but firewall. A human shield between her and suspicion. And then Eric said the one thing I hadn't even thought to ask. "She's not just cheating on you, man. She's stealing in your name. You get that, right? If this ever blows up publicly, your name's on the reports. Not Silas. Not anyone else. Yours." That's when something inside me flipped. All the sadness calcified into something harder. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was endangered. My career, my record, my legal standing, all tied to a woman who once giggled when I folded her socks into neat little rows. And suddenly, the Slack memes weren't even the worst part. They humiliated me for sport, but she exploited me for profit. That night, I didn't go back to Mason's. I booked a cheap hotel room and started building my case. Screenshots, emails, cross-check dates, bank statements, expense reports. Every petty detail I'd overlooked now looked like evidence. Because it was. And she had no idea what was coming. I didn't go back to our apartment right away. For 3 days, I lived out of that cheap hotel, surrounded by piles of screenshots, printouts, and bank statements like a conspiracy theorist with red string on the wall. Every detail I pieced together made the betrayal feel heavier. Not only had she humiliated me socially and gutted me emotionally, she had tethered her financial schemes to my name like a weight designed to sink me with her when it all inevitably collapsed. But unlike the night at her company dinner, I wasn't going to leave quietly this time. I found the perfect opportunity almost by accident. Mason called to say that Danielle's firm was hosting a quarterly strategy session that same week, and outside consultants were invited. His friend Eric, the auditor, confirmed he could get me on the attendee list. "If you really want to end this, Jeremy, you need to do it where she can't talk her way out, in front of someone whose opinion actually matters to her." At first I hesitated. I'm not confrontational, never have been. But then I remembered her laughter at the party, The way she raised her glass, toasting to Silas as if I were nothing but a background character. That memory lit something inside me I didn't know I had. So I ironed my one good shirt, shaved the stubble from my face, and walked into her company's sleek glass office building like I belonged there. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might be sick, but I kept moving. The receptionist didn't even blink when I gave my name. Someone handed me a visitor badge and pointed me to the conference room at the end of the hall. The room was buzzing with voices, people flipping through decks, setting up laptops. And there she was, Danielle, standing at the front, sharp as ever in a fitted blazer, her hair tied back in that way she knew made her look like she owned every space she walked into. She didn't notice me at first. Too busy talking to her boss, a stern-looking man in his 50s with the kind of voice that makes silence fall whenever he speaks. When her eyes finally landed on me, I swear her entire body stiffened for a second. She tried to cover it with a smirk, but the flicker of panic was there, just enough for me to savor. "Jeremy," she said, her voice just a little too high. "What are you doing here?" The room quieted. People turned. I could feel every pair of eyes pressing into me. Normally, that kind of attention would have made me shrink. But not today. Today, I pulled the thick manila folder from my bag and placed it on the table in front of her boss. "I'm here," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "to make sure my name isn't dragged into crimes I didn't commit." Her boss frowned, flipping open the folder. The first page was a printout of the expense report where she'd listed me as a contractor. The next was the email chain with Silas. The next, screenshots from that internal chat where my face had been turned into a Slack emoji, my humiliation replayed in bite-sized memes for her colleagues' amusement. The silence in the room turned suffocating. Danielle's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to say something, maybe to laugh it off, maybe to scold me for being dramatic again, but her boss raised a hand, stopping her cold. He kept flipping through the pages, his jaw tightening with each one. Finally, he looked up, his eyes sharp as a knife. "Danielle," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like glass snapping, "step outside. Now." I didn't stay to watch the fireworks. That wasn't my role anymore. I gathered my bag, left the badge on the table, and walked out without looking back. But as the door closed behind me, I heard her voice, panicked now, scrambling, and his voice, firm, unmoved. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to control. Not victory, not peace, but the smallest flicker of justice. And yet, as I walked back into the cold air outside that building, one thought refused to leave me. Silas wasn't in that room. And I knew, deep down, that this story wasn't finished until I faced him. I didn't think I'd actually go through with it. All weekend I told myself I wouldn't, that it wasn't worth it, that confronting Silas would only drag me back into the mess I'd just crawled out of. But it kept gnawing at me. The image of him smiling in those engagement party photos, standing just close enough to look innocent. The name on the hotel booking. The emoji under our vacation picture that said, "Does he even know?" The more I thought about it, the more it felt unfinished, like a door left halfway open during a storm. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted to look him in the eyes and ask why. Why me? Why her? Why this way? Finding him wasn't hard. Danielle had mentioned his gym before, some boutique boxing place with reclaimed wood walls and overpriced smoothies. The kind of place that marketed grit like it was a fragrance. I called the front desk, pretended to be from a corporate office, and asked if Silas K. was available for a vendor drop-in. The woman on the phone cheerfully told me he'd just wrapped up a sparring session and was cooling down in the lounge. I showed up 15 minutes later, my pulse pounding in my ears. I expected to find someone aggressive, maybe defensive, ready to lie or deny. But Silas? He didn't even flinch. He was sitting on a leather couch, sipping something green out of a mason jar, scrolling his phone. When he looked up and saw me standing there, he smiled, like we were old friends who hadn't seen each other in a while. "Jeremy," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "Didn't expect to see you here. You want a shake?" I stood there, frozen for a second. "You knew who I was." He shrugged. "Of course I did. Danielle talks about you all the time." "Well, used to." That stung, but I held my ground. "You were at our engagement party." He nodded, not even pretending to be surprised. "Yeah, open bar. Shrimp skewers were great." I wanted to hit him. I've never hit anyone in my life, but in that moment, I understood why people do. Not because of anger, but because of the unbearable urge to interrupt someone's smugness with consequences. Why? I asked. Why the jokes? Why the hotel? Why all the lies? Silas leaned back and studied me, like I was a curious species he hadn't fully identified yet. Look, he said, I didn't lie to you. Danielle did. I was just around. She made her own choices. I never promised her anything. She was engaged. He smiled again. Yeah, but not to me. I stared at him, trying to find a crack in his confidence. You didn't feel even a little guilty? He tilted his head, like the question actually amused him. Jeremy, you think this is about love? Danielle didn't want romance. She wanted leverage. Control. You were stability. I was volatility. It made her feel powerful to bounce between the two. My hands curled into fists at my sides. You knew she was stealing money. You knew she was using me. He raised an eyebrow. Did I? That's when I realized something I hadn't before. Silas wasn't just some side fling. He wasn't the guy Danielle snuck off to when she was bored. He was in on it. Not emotionally. Strategically. He pulled his phone out and tapped the screen a few times. Look, I'm not going to pretend we were in love. We weren't. Danielle's sharp, but she burns through people. We were using each other. I got connections through her. She got cover through you. Everyone wins, until someone starts looking too close. He stood up, tossing his smoothie into a trash can without finishing it. You were the only one still playing house. Everyone else was playing chess. I felt sick. This wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. I wasn't just the guy she cheated on. I was the guy she built a structure around. The facade. The beard. The boring, predictable backdrop against which she could run her scams without suspicion. And he knew it. As Silas walked past me, he patted my shoulder. Don't take it personal, man. You were just necessary. That word echoed in my skull. Necessary. Not loved. Not wanted. Just necessary. I left the gym shaking, every part of me burning with the truth of it. The affair wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just about attraction. It was strategic. And I'd been the only idiot who thought this was about trust. She didn't just use me. She constructed me. Like a human alibi. But if she thought I was done, she was wrong. Because I had one final move left, and this time, it wasn't for her. It was for me. I used to think closure came in a dramatic moment. Slamming doors, raised voices, a well-timed monologue that leaves everyone gasping. I thought revenge would taste sweet, like justice dipped in honey. But the truth is, closure is quieter. It's not always a scream. Sometimes it's a door that clicks shut softly and never opens again. I didn't go back to Danielle's apartment after the meeting with Silas. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I didn't gloat. I didn't feed her ego by giving her the show she probably expected. The heartbroken ex, the broken man begging for answers or shouting into the void. No. Instead, I went to a lawyer. Everything Silas confirmed. The fraud, the manipulation, the use of my name in falsified documents. I handed it over to someone who knew how to turn paper into consequence. My lawyer helped me draft a formal affidavit stating that I had no knowledge or participation in any of the transactions tied to Danielle's expense reports. We submitted it directly to her company's legal department, attaching timestamped screenshots and third-party witness accounts from Eric, the former auditor. I also froze the joint credit card we had, removed her from my insurance, and revoked every shared password she had access to. I didn't even leave a note. I just erased my presence from her life the same way she had erased me emotionally over the past year. A week later, Mason texted me a link. It was a business blog, not gossip, but formal industry reporting. Danielle's company had terminated a mid-level executive due to unauthorized reimbursement claims and falsified vendor relationships. No name was listed, but I knew. And so did she. She tried to call after that. 7 times. Then came the emails, first defensive, then apologetic, then manipulative in the way only she could be. I was under pressure. You don't understand how hard it is for women in this industry. I really did care about you. But I didn't reply. She lost her job. Silas, as it turned out, had been doing similar favors for other women in the company and was quietly reassigned, a nice way of saying blacklisted. Their little empire of office drama and secret emails collapsed in on itself. And me? I was finally standing outside of it, clean. But that wasn't the victory. That was just the damage control. The real win came later. I moved back into my own apartment, not the one we shared. I bought new furniture, Threw away the old plates we used to eat from. Got rid of the wine glasses she liked. I adopted a dog. His name's Baxter. He chews on socks and has no idea what betrayal means. He just knows I come home now and stay. And maybe the best part? I started writing again. Not just Reddit posts like this one. Real writing. I took the pain, the humiliation, the collapse, and I turned it into chapters. Short stories. Fiction. Somewhere in the middle of it, I realized something. She may have used me, but she didn't get the last word. I did. People often say that healing is a straight line. It's not. It's a spiral. Some days, I still wake up thinking about the sound of her laugh at that dinner party. Sometimes I still check the locks twice, like betrayal can sneak in with the wind. But then Baxter nudges my leg, or I get an email from a publisher about a submission I forgot I sent, and I remember, I survived her. And that's enough. She built a house of lies and tried to live in it. I walked out and built something better. And maybe that's the most poetic ending of all.